The crystal chamber aboard New Geneva Station sparkled like a geode split open to the stars. Dr. Amanda Hayes stood at the back, her tablet clutched tight against her chest as she watched humanity's first major diplomatic summit unravel into a spectacle of interstellar mockery. And here we have yet another example of your species' charming primitiveness, High Speaker Kizoth announced, his crystalline translator converting his electromagnetic pulses into what Hayes considered unnecessarily capitalized English. The 9-foot-tall Scathraxian's iridescent scales rippled with patterns of light that conveyed additional layers of meaning, most of it condescending. The human delegation shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Admiral Chen opened his mouth to object, but Ambassador Williams placed a restraining hand on his arm. They'd been warned about the Scathraxians' cultural superiority complex, but experiencing it firsthand was something else entirely. "These words you push through your breathing holes," Kizoth continued, his secondary appendages creating complex bioluminescent displays. "They are like watching cave dwellers bang rocks together for music." The other Scathraxian delegates chittered, their version of laughter, as patterns of blue and gold danced across their scales. Hayes' translation software struggled to keep up with the multiple layers of communication, but she didn't need to understand they were enjoying this far too much. She glanced down at her tablet, where her specialized linguistics program was recording and analyzing every flicker of light, every electromagnetic pulse. Something about their secondary communication patterns tugged at her memory, like a word stuck on the tip of her tongue. "Observe true communication," Kizoth declared. The chamber's lights dimmed automatically as the Scathraxian delegation began their display. Their scales erupted in synchronized waves of color, while their bioelectric organs generated precise electromagnetic pulses. The effect was admittedly beautiful, like an aurora borealis given purpose and direction. Hayes' tablet buzzed silently in her hands as it captured the data. Her eyes widened as the first pattern analysis appeared on her screen. She quickly adjusted the parameters, sure she must have made a mistake. "This is how civilized beings share information," Kizoth announced proudly. "No crude sound waves, no primitive muscle spasms in your speech organs. Pure energy and light, conveying multiple layers of meaning simultaneously." But Hayes barely heard him. She was too focused on the patterns emerging on her screen. The electromagnetic pulses weren't random. They followed specific rhythmic structures she'd seen before in humanity's oldest known languages. "Your species will need to adapt," Kizoth declared, his scales now pulsing with what Hayes' software identified as smug satisfaction. "If you wish to join the galactic community, you must evolve beyond these mouth noises." The human delegation sat in uncomfortable silence. This was a pivotal moment for Earth, their first real chance at joining the greater galactic civilization. They couldn't afford to let pride get in the way. But Hayes' hands were shaking now. The correlation couldn't be this strong by chance. She ran the analysis again, comparing the Scathraxian communication patterns against her database of ancient language structures. The result was the same. She looked up at Kizoth, his massive form dominating the chamber as he continued to lecture about the superiority of Scathraxian communication. His scales danced with patterns of light that were supposed to be incomprehensible to human perception. But Hayes saw it now. The underlying structure, the rhythm, the mathematical relationships between the pulses. It was impossible, but the evidence was right there on her tablet. The Scathraxians' supposedly advanced communication system contained embedded patterns identical to Proto-Indo-European languages. Their superior method of information exchange shared its basic structure with the most ancient human tongues. As the delegation meeting devolved further into thinly veiled insults about humanity's technological and cultural inadequacies, Hayes slowly backed away toward the chamber's exit. She needed to analyze this data properly, needed to confirm what she was seeing. Because if she was right, the Scathraxians' smug superiority was about to collapse under the weight of an impossible truth, one that connected their species in ways neither side could have imagined. She cast one last look at the preening aliens before slipping out of the chamber. Their light show continued, but now she saw it differently. In every flash and pulse, she saw echoes of humanity's past, and perhaps the key to its future. The soft blue glow of holographic displays cast dancing shadows across Dr. Amanda Hayes' laboratory aboard New Geneva Station. The station's night cycle was in full effect, with most of the diplomatic contingent and support staff long since retired to their quarters. But sleep was the furthest thing from Hayes' mind as she pored over the data from the summit. "Run Comparative Analysis Series 7 again," she commanded, her voice slightly hoarse from hours of work. The computer hummed in response, projecting a new set of waveform patterns alongside ancient linguistic manuscripts. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago, but she barely noticed as she took another sip. The patterns were there, undeniable, impossible, yet persistent across every analysis she ran. The Scythraxians' electromagnetic communication pulses shared more than a passing resemblance to Earth's oldest languages. The correlation was precise, mathematical, and deeply unsettling. "Display temporal mapping of Proto-Indo-European phonemic structures against Scythraxian primary communication bands," she ordered. The holographic display shifted, overlaying the patterns. They matched like pieces of a puzzle separated by millennia. A soft chime interrupted her concentration. "Dr. Hayes, you have an incoming transmission from the Scythraxian diplomatic vessel," the station's AI announced. Hayes frowned. "At this hour, put it through." Instead of the expected diplomatic channel, her linguistics array caught something else, a burst of encrypted electromagnetic pulses. Her software, still running analysis protocols from her earlier work, automatically began processing the signal. Her blood ran cold as the translation appeared on her screen. This wasn't a diplomatic message. It was a military communication, never meant for human eyes. Phase 1 proceeds as planned. The primitives suspect nothing. Their defense network protocols are laughably simple. Begin infiltration sequence at 400 station time. Hayes' hands flew across her console, tracking the signal's path. More transmissions followed, each one painting a darker picture. The Scythraxians weren't here for diplomacy. They were mapping Earth's defense systems, using their superior communication method to slip past human cybersecurity. "Computer, get me Admiral Chen's quarters," she commanded, but only static answered. Her communication panel displayed an error message. "Network access restricted. Maintenance protocol in effect." "That's not possible," she muttered, trying another channel. Nothing. She was cut off. A new transmission caught her attention. The translation made her heart skip. "Human female in Lab 7 still active. Monitoring systems show she may have intercepted communications. Proceed with contingency protocol." Hayes moved quickly, downloading her findings to a secure data crystal. The lab door hissed shut behind her as heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. She ducked into a maintenance shaft just as two Scythraxian cultural attaches passed by, their scales pulsing with patterns that her newly calibrated translator rendered as hunting coordinates. She needed help, but more than that, she needed proof, irrefutable evidence of both the Scythraxians' true intentions and the impossible connection between their languages. Her mind raced through possibilities before settling on a name: Dr. Marcus Reynolds. The maverick quantum linguist was controversial in academic circles, but his theories about the quantum nature of language evolution might be the key to understanding what she'd discovered, if she could reach him. Hayes crawled through the maintenance shaft, grateful for the station's modular design. Her tablet continued recording and translating Scythraxian communications, each one more alarming than the last. They weren't just planning to hack Earth's defenses, they were going to use humanity's own communication infrastructure against them. But they had made one crucial mistake. In their arrogance, they never considered that their superior communication method might be compromised. They never imagined that a human could understand the deeper patterns in their language, patterns that spoke of a connection they themselves seemed to have forgotten. As she emerged from the maintenance shaft near the civilian quarters, Hayes allowed herself a grim smile. The Scythraxians had spent the entire diplomatic summit mocking humanity's primitive communication methods. Now those same primitive skills might be the only thing standing between Earth and disaster. She clutched the data crystal containing her analysis. Somewhere in the patterns of light and energy the Scythraxians used to communicate lay the key to their shared past, and possibly humanity's survival. She just needed time to prove it. Dr. Marcus Reynolds' office at the Quantum Linguistics Institute looked like a cross between a library and a mad scientist's lair. Holographic projections of wave functions danced around shelves crammed with ancient texts, while quantum computers hummed quietly in the corners. The man himself sat cross-legged on his desk, staring at Hayes' data crystal, as if it might explode. "You're telling me," he said slowly, "that you found quantum entanglement patterns in alien communication that matched Proto-Indo-European language structures." His wild gray hair seemed to stand even more on end than usual. Hayes nodded, fighting exhaustion. She'd spent 6 hours evading Scythraxian pursuit before making it to Earth. "Everyone thought your theories about quantum linguistics were crazy, Marcus. But look at the correlation patterns." Reynolds plugged the crystal into his main system. The room's holographic displays shifted, showing overlapping waves of electromagnetic patterns and ancient language structures. His eyes widened as the analysis programs ran. 94% correlation, he whispered. "That's impossible. Unless..." He jumped off his desk and began pacing, his hands moving as if conducting an invisible orchestra. Unless the quantum signatures in early human language weren't random at all. Unless they were imprinted somehow, encoded with. A soft chime interrupted him. Hayes' tablet displayed a new intercepted transmission. Earth-side target located. Quantum Linguistics Institute. Proceed with extraction. "We need to move," Hayes said, already gathering the most crucial data modules. "They're coming." Reynolds barely seemed to notice the warning, lost in his analysis. "Look at these patterns. The Scythraxian communication system isn't more advanced. It's using the same quantum principles that existed in ancient human languages. But they've forgotten the original source." The building's security system pinged. Multiple unauthorized entries detected at ground level. "Marcus," Hayes snapped, grabbing his arm. "The Scythraxians are here, and they're not coming for a linguistics debate. They're trying to shut us down before we expose the truth." That finally got his attention. He blinked, looking around as if just remembering where he was. "Right. Yes, but we need to complete this analysis. There's something else in these patterns, something older than both our species." The floor trembled slightly as the building's elevator activated. Hayes checked her tablet. The Scythraxians were jamming normal communications, but their own signals were still visible to her modified translator. 4 sentries approaching target location scrolled across her screen. "Capture primary targets. Destroy all research data." Reynolds was hurriedly connecting data crystals to his quantum computer array. 3 minutes, he said. "I need 3 minutes to complete the deep pattern analysis. There's something hidden in the quantum structure of their language, some kind of embedded." A massive explosion rocked the building. Emergency lights flashed as backup power systems engage. "Time's up," Hayes said, drawing him away from the computers. "We need to." Her voice trailed off as new patterns appeared in the holographic display. The quantum analysis had found something. A deep structure hidden within both the Scythraxian signals and ancient human languages. It pulsed with a complexity that made her head spin. "It's beautiful," Reynolds whispered. "It's not just similar patterns. It's the same pattern. Like someone encoded a message into the quantum structure of communication itself, and both our species are just using different parts of it." Heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway outside. Hayes grabbed the main data crystal and shoved it into her pocket. "We can admire it later. Right now, we need to survive to decrypt it." Reynolds nodded, finally snapping out of his academic trance. He pressed his hand against a seemingly normal section of wall, revealing the hidden passage. My colleagues called me paranoid for installing this. Funny how preparing for hypothetical alien invasions doesn't seem so crazy anymore. As they slipped into the secret tunnel, Hayes' tablet captured one final Scyphraxian transmission. Warning: targets have located the pattern. Initiate Omega Protocol. The truth must not be revealed. The Mongolian wind howled across the steppes as Hayes and Reynolds followed their guide through the darkness. The old nomad woman, who had introduced herself only as Bat Bayar, moved with surprising speed across the rocky terrain. Her weathered face revealed nothing as she led them toward what appeared to be an ordinary hillside. "Your message said there were answers here," Hayes said, clutching her coat tighter against the cold. Their escape from the Quantum Linguistics Institute had led them on a wild chase across 3 continents, staying one step ahead of the Scyphraxian pursuit. Bat Bayar stopped at what looked like a natural rock formation. "My family has guarded this place for generations," she said in perfect English, surprising them both. "We were told ones like you would come, when the Star Walkers returned." Reynolds studied the rock face with growing excitement. "These markings, they're not erosion patterns." He ran his fingers along barely visible grooves. "They're mathematical sequences." Hayes' tablet hummed to life, detecting familiar energy signatures. "There's something generating electromagnetic pulses similar to Scyphraxian communications, but older somehow, more primitive." Bat Bayar pressed her palm against a specific pattern of grooves. A hidden door slid open with a soft hiss of ancient machinery. "The archive awaits," she said, gesturing them inside. "But be warned, you are not the only ones seeking its secrets." The tunnel beyond was illuminated by strips of light that seemed to pulse in familiar patterns. Hayes' translation software began picking up signals immediately, but these were different from modern Scyphraxian communications, more rhythmic, almost musical. "This technology," Reynolds breathed, examining the walls. "It's a hybrid. Human construction methods, but with integrated alien components. This facility must be thousands of years old." They emerged into a vast chamber that took their breath away. The circular room was lined with crystalline data storage units, each pulsing with its own internal light. At the center stood a pillar covered in what appeared to be early human writing systems alongside unmistakably Scyphraxian glyphs. "Look at this," Hayes said, approaching the pillar. "These aren't just parallel texts. They're teaching tools, like the Rosetta Stone, but designed to bridge the gap between human and Scyphraxian communication." Reynolds was already connecting his portable quantum scanner to one of the crystal units. "These storage crystals, they're using quantum entanglement to preserve information. The same principles I found in ancient languages, but engineered into physical form." A soft scraping sound echoed from somewhere in the darkness. Bat Bayar's expression turned grim. "They have followed you. I must seal the entrance. Find what you need quickly." Hayes worked frantically to document the pillar's inscriptions while Reynolds downloaded data from the crystals. Their tablets began picking up scattered Scyphraxian communications, distorted by the facility's ancient security systems. "They're inside the tunnel network," Hayes whispered, reading the translations. "Multiple teams converging on our location." Reynolds pointed to a section of the pillar. "Look at this. It's not just linguistic data, it's coordinates. Star maps. The Scyphraxians didn't just visit Earth. They were running from something." The chamber's lights flickered as distant explosions shook the facility. Dust rained from the ceiling as ancient support systems struggled to compensate. "The data transfer's only at 60%, Reynolds said, checking his equipment. "We need more time." Hayes studied the pillar's maps, a terrible realization dawning. These aren't just coordinates of where they came from. They're warning markers. The Scyphraxians who came to Earth were refugees, and whatever they were fleeing. She pointed to a series of symbols. They thought it might follow them here. Another explosion, closer this time. Bat Bayar appeared from a side passage. "There is another way out, through the old evacuation tunnels, but we must leave now." As they hurriedly disconnected their equipment, Hayes noticed something odd about the chamber's lighting. The pulses weren't random. They were repeating a specific pattern, growing stronger as the Scythraxian forces drew closer. It's a warning system, she realized. The facility is trying to tell us something. Her tablet began translating the light pulses, displaying a message that made her blood run cold. They have returned. The ones they fled. Hide the truth or all will burn. The evacuation tunnels had led them to a hidden valley in the Altai Mountains. Dawn painted the snow-capped peaks in shades of rose and gold as Hayes examined the data they'd recovered. Behind her, Reynolds paced in the small shepherd's hut where Backfires' family had sheltered them. "This can't be right," Reynolds muttered, running the analysis for the fourth time. The quantum dating of these crystal records shows they're over 15,000 years old. Hayes finished, her eyes fixed on her tablet's display. And that's not even the most incredible part. The data crystals from the archive had contained more than just linguistic patterns. They held memory recordings, the preserved experiences of the original Scythraxian refugees who had arrived on Earth millennia ago. "Play the primary record again," Hayes requested. The crystal projector hummed to life, filling the small room with a holographic display. The image showed a Scythraxian, but different from the modern ones, smaller with simpler bioluminescent patterns. "I am Selthor, chief historian of the Resistance," the recording began. "If you are viewing this, then our greatest fear has come to pass. The purifiers have found us." Reynolds stopped pacing, watching intently as the ancient alien continued. "Our civil war was not about resources or territory, as the High Council claims. It was about memory itself. The purifiers believe that knowledge of our past makes us weak, that only by erasing our history can we achieve perfection." Hayes' translator picked up secondary communication patterns in the recording, emotional overtones of grief and desperation that the modern Scythraxians seemed to have lost. "We fled to this world because its people were different. The humans," a hologram flickered with colors expressing wonder. "They preserve their history. They pass down stories through generations. They remember. That's why the modern Scythraxians don't know their own history," Hayes said softly. "The purifiers won the Civil War. They erased everything." The recording continued. "We worked with the humans, teaching them our sciences while learning their art of memory. Together, we created a new form of communication, one that could hide our history where the purifiers would never think to look. In language itself." Reynolds' quantum scanner beeped, completing its analysis of the crystal's deeper layers. The quantum entanglement patterns in human languages. They're not just similar to Scythraxian communications. They're encrypted data storage. Our modern technologies, which the High Council claims make us superior, the hologram continued, are actually degraded versions of the systems we created here. The humans helped us encode our true history into the very foundation of their languages, preserving it through their oral traditions. Hayes pulled up the correlation analysis between Proto-Indo-European and modern Scythraxian communication patterns. Their advanced communication method is just accessing fragments of that stored data. They're using it without understanding what it really is. The hologram's colors shifted to warning tones. But the purifiers suspect. They will come, searching for any trace of the truth. If they find these records, they will destroy not just our history, but all who know of it. A distant explosion shook the hut. Hayes' tablet picked up new Scythraxian transmissions. Search parties closing in on their location. They're not just trying to stop us from revealing their connection to humanity, Hayes realized. They're trying to prevent their own people from learning what was done to them. Reynolds quickly began copying the most crucial data to their backup crystals. The modern Scythraxians, they're descendants of the purifiers. Their entire civilization is built on this lie. The hologram gave its final warning. To those who find this truth, be careful. Our people have become what they fear most, a species without a past, claiming superiority to hide their own emptiness. The knowledge you now hold could free them, or destroy us all. Outside, the morning sun caught the snow in brilliant patterns, not unlike the bioluminescent displays of their pursuers. But now Hayes saw those lights differently, not as signs of advancement, but as echoes of a lost heritage, fragments of memory trying to reassert themselves after millennia of enforced forgetting. The grand chamber of the Galactic Council stretched upward in sweeping curves of crystal and light. Representatives from 200 species filled the spiral tiers, their murmurs echoing through the vast space. Dr. Amanda Hayes stood at the speaker's podium, her heart pounding as she faced the assembled delegates. The evidence crystal felt heavy in her palm. High Speaker Kizoth loomed at his own podium, his scales rippling with smug confidence. "Honorable Council," his translator boomed, "the humans have brought us here on the basis of wild speculation and stolen data." Hayes watched the patterns of light playing across his scales. Now that she understood their true nature, she could see the fragments of ancient memory hiding in plain sight, corrupted but still present, like corrupted computer code trying to repair itself. Before Dr. Hayes presents her so-called evidence, Kizoth continued, "We must show you the truth." His scales flared with complex patterns as he activated a massive holographic display. "We have discovered that humans have attempted to corrupt our sacred communication methods." The display showed carefully edited historical records, fake data suggesting humans had stolen and degraded Scythraxian technology. The council chamber erupted in concerned whispers. "This is why we came to Earth," Kizoth declared, "to prevent further corruption of our cultural heritage." "The humans. Are you familiar with the name Excelfor?" Hayes interrupted, her voice clear and steady. The effect was immediate. Kizoth's scales flickered with patterns of shock before he could control them. In the Scythraxian delegation, several younger members stirred, their own bioluminescence showing recognition. "That name has no meaning," Kizoth said quickly, but Hayes was already moving. She plugged her crystal into the chamber's central projection system. 15,000 years ago, a group of Scythraxian refugees came to Earth. They were fleeing from those who would erase their history, the Purifiers, who believed that memory made them weak. The chamber filled with the image of Selfor from the archive. Several Scythraxian delegates rose from their seats, their scales pulsing with patterns that Hayes' translator rendered as disbelief and recognition. "This is propaganda," Kizoth thundered. "A human fabrication." Hayes pressed another control. The chamber's translation system began picking up and displaying the secondary patterns in Kizoth's own communication, the hidden mathematical structures that matched the ancient records perfectly. "Your own communication method proves the truth," Hayes said. "The patterns you use, the ones you claim make you superior. They're fragments of a system designed to preserve Scythraxian history inside human languages. Your ancestors worked with humans to hide their culture from the Purifiers." "Enough." Kizoth's scales blazed with fury. He began broadcasting emergency override codes, trying to shut down the translation system. But Hayes had anticipated this. She activated the final program, one that Reynolds had prepared using the archive's data. The chamber's sensors began broadcasting in the original Earth Scythraxian hybrid language. The effect on the Scythraxian delegates was electric. Their scales rippled with recognition as deep ancestral memories stirred. The hybrid language bypassed millennia of conditioning, speaking directly to genetic memories they didn't know they carried. "Your own bodies remember the truth," Hayes said, her words now accompanied by perfect electromagnetic pulses in the ancient patterns. The Purifiers didn't just try to erase history. They tried to erase the very concept of preservation, of memory itself. Young Vixta, the junior delegate Hayes had noticed earlier, stood up. "The old songs," she said, her scales showing patterns of revelation. "The patterns we dismiss as meaningless tradition. They're these same frequencies." Kizoth barked orders at his security team. But it was too late. Across the chamber, Scythraxian delegates were beginning to pulse in the ancient patterns, their bodies remembering what their minds had been forced to forget. "We are not here to shame you," Hayes said, addressing the entire Scythraxian delegation. "We're here to return what was taken from you. Your history, your truth, the memory of a time when our species worked together to preserve knowledge, not destroy it." The chamber's lights dimmed as the full recording from the archive began to play. In the darkness, hundreds of Scythraxian delegates began to glow with patterns that hadn't been seen in 15,000 years. Patterns of remembrance, of recognition, of return. The Scythraxian capital world of Luminera blazed with unprecedented patterns of light. Millions of citizens filled the crystal spires and floating platforms, their scales pulsing with colors that hadn't been seen in millennia. The revelation at the Galactic Council had spread like wildfire through the quantum communication networks, igniting a cultural revolution that threatened to tear their society apart. Dr. Hayes stood at a window in the central archive, watching the chaos unfold. Below, young Scythraxians, led by Vixta, staged demonstrations, their scales flickering with the recovered ancient patterns. Security forces tried to disperse them, only to find their own bodies betraying them, resonating with the old frequencies. "The genetic memory runs deeper than we imagined," Reynolds said, analyzing the data streams on his quantum console. "Every time they try to suppress the ancient patterns, more of their people remember." Vixta entered the archive chamber, her scales shimming with determination. "The High Council is falling apart," she reported. 3 more eldest have admitted to knowing fragments of the truth. The suppression protocols are failing across all major cities. Hayes' translator picked up complex harmonics in the background electromagnetic noise. Millions of Scythraxians, unconsciously broadcasting in the old patterns, their bodies remembering what their minds had been forced to forget. "The purifiers didn't just erase our history," Vixta continued, her colors shifting to show deep emotion. "They rebuilt our entire society on the foundation of that lie. Our architecture, our education system, our social hierarchy, all of it designed to prevent us from looking too deeply into our past." A distant explosion rocked the archive. Hayes' tablet displayed emergency broadcasts. Radical traditionalist factions were attacking communication hubs, trying to prevent the spread of historical records. "They're calling themselves the new purifiers," Vixta said, her patterns showing disgust. "They claim that remembering will destroy us, that forgetting made us strong." "But they're wrong," Reynolds interjected, pulling up new data. "Look at these neural scans. The recovered memories aren't just historical data. They're showing us how much we lost. The original Scythraxian communication system was far more sophisticated than what you use now. It could transmit entire experiences, not just information." The archive screens filled with footage from across the planet. In some cities, the younger generation embraced the change, their scales blazing with recovered patterns as they shared the ancient memories. In others, conservatives fought to maintain the old order, their own bodies betraying them as suppressed patterns emerged in moments of stress. Our entire concept of superiority, Vixta realized, was built on fragments of abilities we once had. Like children finding pieces of advanced technology and thinking we invented it. Hayes studied the patterns of unrest spreading across the planet. "Your people aren't just facing their past," she said softly. "They're confronting the possibility that everything they believed about themselves was wrong." Another explosion, closer this time. The archive's security systems, engaged as a group of new purifiers, attempted to breach the building. But they were met by an unexpected sight. Hundreds of ordinary citizens forming a protective ring around the facility, their scales glowing with ancient patterns of unity and preservation. "They can't stop it now," Vixta said, watching the scene below. "Every attempt to suppress the truth just triggers more genetic memories. The patterns are evolving, combining modern forms with ancient structures. We're not just remembering our past, we're rebuilding it." Reynolds' console chimed with new data. The quantum resonance is spreading beyond the capital. Colonial worlds, outposts, even isolated research stations, all reporting the same phenomenon. The recovered patterns are propagating through the entire quantum communication network. Hayes watched as the crowds below began pulsing in synchronized patterns, their light shows growing more complex and beautiful by the moment. What had started as recovered memory was becoming something new, a synthesis of past and present, of lost knowledge and modern innovation. Your ancestors hid your history in patterns of light and sound, she said to Vixta. They trusted that someday your people would be ready to remember. That truth, once awakened, couldn't be buried again. The sun set on Luminara, but the city glowed brighter than ever, millions of Scythraxians pulsing with the light of recovered memory, each pattern a defiance of enforced forgetting, each color a step toward reclaiming their true heritage. 6 months after the revelation that shook the Scythraxian Empire, the crystal chamber of New Geneva Station hummed with a different kind of energy. Where once there had been mockery and condescension, now there was collaboration and discovery. Dr. Amanda Hayes stood before a mixed team of human and Scythraxian researchers, watching as they tested the newly reconstructed communication system. The quantum resonance is stable, announced Dr. Reynolds, monitoring the complex arrays of equipment surrounding them. We're ready for the first full spectrum test. Vixta, now the head of the Interspecies Historical Reconstruction Project, stepped into the testing chamber. Her scales rippled with anticipation as she prepared to attempt communication using the restored ancient protocols. Remember, Hayes said through the intercom, this isn't just about transmitting information. The original system was designed to share experience itself. The chamber filled with light as Vixta began to pulse. But this wasn't the simple bioluminescence of modern Scythraxian communication. Layers of color and energy wove together in intricate patterns, each frequency carrying different aspects of memory and meaning. The human researchers in the room gasped as their neural interfaces translated the transmission. They weren't just receiving data, they were experiencing a memory from 15,000 years ago, seeing through the eyes of the first Scythraxian refugees as they met the ancient humans who would help them preserve their culture. The integration is perfect, Reynolds breathed, checking the quantum signatures. The system isn't just reconstructing the past, it's creating a new framework for understanding between species. Around the station, other breakthrough projects were underway. In one lab, linguists studied how the encrypted historical data had shaped the evolution of human languages. In another, Scythraxian scientists examined how their own bodies had preserved crucial information through generations of enforced forgetting. We've confirmed 23 previously unknown historical sites, reported Dr. Backfires, now the project's chief archaeologist, her voice coming through the station's communication system. Each one contains new evidence of the collaboration between our peoples. Hayes moved through the chamber, watching as humans and Scythraxians worked side by side. The younger Scythraxians had embraced the change most readily, their natural aptitude for the recovered communication methods making them invaluable bridges between past and present. The most remarkable discovery, Vixta said, emerging from the testing chamber, is that the system was never meant to be used by just one species. The original designers built it for true cooperation. The station's main display activated, showing feeds from across human and Scythraxian space. On Earth, ancient sites were being re-examined with new understanding. On Luminara, the crystal cities pulsed with recovered patterns that now carried meaning instead of just tradition. The new Purifiers movement had faded as more and more Scythraxians embraced their rediscovered heritage. We're not just reconstructing history, Hayes realized, watching the feeds. We're fulfilling it. This is what our ancestors worked together to achieve. A future where both species could share knowledge freely. Reynolds pulled up the latest data from their quantum linguistics research. The encrypted patterns we found. They're not just storage. They're seeds, designed to grow and evolve, as both our species developed. Even the Purifiers couldn't fully erase them, because they were meant to emerge when we were ready. The chamber's lights dimmed as Vixta initiated another demonstration. This time, the patterns told the story of the present, the moment when truth overcame lies, when memory proved stronger than suppression, when two species rediscovered their shared legacy. Our ancestors had faith, Hayes said, watching the beautiful display. They believed that eventually we would remember not just the past, but the possibility of what we could become together. As the sun set outside the station's crystal walls, the combined research team prepared to publish their findings to both civilizations. The light show they created to accompany the announcement was more than just communication. It was a bridge across time, a fulfillment of ancient hopes, and a promise of discoveries yet to come. In the end, what the purifiers had tried to destroy had only grown stronger through its hiding. The truth, preserved in patterns of light and sound, in the structure of language itself, had waited patiently through millennia for its moment to emerge. And now, at last, both species could step together into the future their ancestors had dreamed of, carrying forward not just the light of knowledge, but the wisdom to use it well.